Today we're going to talk about how to load each of our Grace frames. We have the Cutie tabletop, the Evolution hoop frame, and the Evolution Elite rolling frame. And we're going to talk about the different ways to load each frame.
Before you load your frame, it's a good idea to clean and check everything. So the first thing that you want to do is dust off all of your rails. I'm using just a cloth that's not going to create any linting. You can also use a little bit of water to clean those things, right? So I'd clean all of those because any little bit of dust or grime that's on there is going to affect how smoothly it moves. You also want to check your wheels on both your top and bottom carriage, and you'll kind of see sometimes those are a little dirty. And so you can slide around and kind of clean those. Don't forget those ones on the inside as well. Look for any leftover thread that might have got tangled in here and take them out. Also look for anything that's loose. So like if any of these have gotten loose, you can get your tools out and just kind of retighten them. Make sure everything's moving nicely. If you do have channel locks, same thing. You want to make sure that those are working properly. And then be sure that you check all of your encoders, right? And clean around those encoders as well, because those will affect how your machine moves, right? So here's our encoder. We want to kind of clean around here. We also want to make sure that it's sitting properly. And if it's not, then we can adjust that again with our tools. Sometimes they loosen up, and if they do loosen up, be sure that you kind of tighten them down and they're in the place that they want to be. And then lastly, you want to make sure that your frame is level. So put it in the center. And if it slides from one side or another, then you know that your frame is not level. As you can see, this one's off just a little bit. And down here at the bottom, if your frame has legs, you can crawl under there with your wrenches and just kind of give it a good adjustment. And that's, you don't want your machine to get away from you when you're doing your actual quilting, right? So that's just kind of prepping your frame. Last thing to check, if you are using automation, and this one isn't set up for automation, but you'd want to check your belts. Make sure that they're clean and you didn't have anything left over like batting or anything on there. And then you want to make sure that they're tight, because if you loosen them to do any free motion quilting, you just want to make sure that you've retightened them so your automation will work properly.
Before you roll your frame, you need to prepare your quilt sandwich or your quilt sandwich pieces depending on which frame you're using. So it's important to have your backing, mark your centers for all of the frames. You'll also need to prepare batting and your top, your quilt top. With the batting and the backing, you want to make sure with the hoop frames that they're at least 10 inches larger, so 5 inches larger on each side, than your quilt top. For the rolling frame, you only need to have 4 inches on each side to make sure that you have a little bit of extra room for comfort and for stretching and fabric shrinkage. If you have leader claws, you'll want to put those on first. With a rolling frame, they stay on your machine unless you're switching between projects, which is a nice part about having that rolling frame. As you have all of your pieces done, you have your backing measured out, your centers marked, as well as your batting measured out to make sure that it's bigger than your quilt top, but just a little bit smaller than your backing. You'll just get ready to go with how to load each of our frames.
I'm going to show you a way to load your Cutie frame. You can prepare your quilt sandwich in advance, but what I've done is I've prepared my backing, my top, and my batting separately. And I'm going to show you a way that you can do it so you don't actually have to prepare your quilt sandwich to put it on the frame. I want you to note how I rolled the stuff up for a hoop frame, and this would be for any type of hoop frame. My backing, as you can see how I have it rolled, it is the right side is facing me, because when I put it on the frame, I want the wrong side to be up. So that's why we have that. And I just kind of put these on pool noodles. Pool noodles are just a great way to organize your fabric and keep the wrinkles out of it. All right, so what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to unroll it a little bit once I get all my pins out. Make sure that my needle is up. And I'm just going to tuck that over the bar. When I'm setting up my quilt sandwich for the cutie frame, I need to think about the zones I have for quilting, because I do have a smaller zone, right? So I got to kind of think about those edges, but this is a smaller quilt, and I'm going to sort of start in the middle. The best way I can find is the middle. And I think this is a good place for my backing, so I'm just going to use these little clips temporarily just to kind of help me hold that in place while I get my backing ready. So I'm going to just move my top out of the way. And I'm going to start to unroll this a little bit, but I can put it on my tabletop. And now I'm ready to get my backing lined up. So this is just going to help me stay organized as I'm doing this. All right, when I rolled the batting on here, I made sure that the part that's going to go against the backing is the fluffy side, because that's what I want down. All right, so I have that ready to go. And so I'm just going to unroll that a little bit. Or if it rolls all the way off, that's fine too. And same thing, just going to feed that up. And get that as centered as I can. And remember that my backing is cut larger than my batting, which are both cut larger than my quilt top. So makes it nice and easy. All right, so I'm just making sure that I'm aligned. And if these aren't working for me, I can always use my clamps just to kind of hold it in place temporarily for me. I also like those beach clips. If you've seen those big beach clips for towels, as kind of a temporary measure for holding my quilt sandwich up while I'm still organizing it. So that looks pretty good. Right, so now I'm ready to get the top on. So notice that the way I rolled this one, I see the wrong side on the outside, so that when I unroll it, the right side is going to be facing up. Right, so again, just going to tuck that up. I can also base this if I wanted to pin base this, but I'm actually just going to put this little extra part here because I can always, I like to sometimes do my borders separately on my machine, but just for the sake of argument and just getting this on here so I can show you, I'm going to put that there. Okay, so I've got everything, all my layers up here. And I like to start with the middle one. Now you'll notice that what I did is I took the middle spring thing off, because for me, it doesn't really help me keep control of my quilt. I like it just really on the ends when I have a roll. And so it also helps me go, hey, this is my middle one. I also like to mark mine with a pen so I know where my quilt zones are, but this one I haven't marked. So now I can use that to get that center part nice and secure, right? So that's all gonna stay here for me, which means I am ready to roll my backing over my front bar. All right. So now I can just bye-bye to my roller. We'll just go whee! All right, so that's out of the way. All right, and I'm going to do the same thing with my batting, because it's being held at the top. That's gone. And I'm going to do the same thing with my quilt top. These are fun too because you can throw them and not hurt anybody. Okay, so now I'm ready to really get this on here. I have the center still secure. I'm now going to secure my right side. And this is where I'm just doing a little bit of tugging to kind of make sure things are smoothed out. Then I'm going to do my left side once I get my temporary clip off of here. Now remember, with the cutie, you can do any size quilt that you like. The bigger it is, the more you're going to hoop and rehoop. Right, and then I like to use these to determine where is my stitching going to end. Right, so that's as far as this can go. So I will slide this down, and this becomes a little reminder. I'll give myself a little bit less space so I don't end up flattening out any of my designs. And I'll check it on the other side. All right, so that's pretty good. That looks good. All right, so now I want to make sure I am secure underneath. And so this is a good time for me to take a little peek and see, do I need to do any adjustments to my back and get that straightened out? Right, because sometimes you get a few wrinkles. Straighten out my batting. And then once I feel pretty good about that, I'm going to put my front clamps on. And I like to give them a little bit of a twist. That's just going to tighten up my sandwich. Do a double check that everything looks good underneath, because we don't want wrinkles. And then I can baste, I can go straight to quilting if I wanted to. With this one, I'd probably start the quilt in the center, so I'd have this more up. Any excess material, which I don't have yet, would get put into here, but as you zone quilt and you move up your quilt, you're gonna get a larger and larger roll on this side, but you can drape everything on this side. So it's pretty easy, very convenient, like fits on your tabletop, and that is how we can load without doing the quilt sandwich ahead of time right onto our cutie. Next, I'm going to show you how to load the Evolution hoop frame. I love my Evolution frame. One of the reasons that I love it is because I got really used to zone quilting when I started out with the cutie. But I wanted something a little bit bigger, and I wanted a fancier machine, and I wanted something that was dedicated instead of putting it on a tabletop. But it also gave me the benefit of this roller bar. So I'm actually going to talk about two different ways in which you load this machine. Now, similarly to the way that I loaded the cutie, I do have my fabric rolled up, but I'm going to be using a leader on this one. So what I've done is I have my backing and I have my batting, and they are pinned to my leader. My leader has this wire hose thing in here that's great for clamping onto the machine, or excuse me, onto the frame once we get the clamps on there. All right, so I'm going to need to move this out of the way because I'm going to need to be able to feed my leader underneath this part. I'm going to have to do that from the edge because it does have that like rope like hose thing in there. Okay, so I haven't trimmed mine, you can, but the reason that they come so long is that with the Evolution frame, you can make it bigger. So you can start out with the about 5 foot of space, but you can add extensions to it and make it larger. So it will really evolve with you as you are evolving in your quilting. Right? So you can see I've got that feeded over there. And now I'm going to just kind of throw that. The weight is going to help me hold this on as well. I'm going to find my center. And say, that looks pretty good to me. And I did mark it. And then I'm going to use my clamp in the center. And I'm going to make sure I'm straight. Oops, I did this one backwards because I was on the other side of the machine and the other side of the frame. So make sure that's nice and straight. All right. And so now, just like I did with the cutie, I'm going to put my back and my batting over the bar. And this is where I'm going to do my straightening, but I'm nice and secure up here. Like I said, do my little peeking. All right, and I'm just going to use one clamp temporarily just to kind of hold this down, and I'm going to go get my top. So I can place my top centered. And I could pin baste or I can machine baste at this point. I'm just going to leave it loose for now. Make sure everything's straight. And then because, you know, if it's basted, it's going to stay in place. And then I can roll that top right on there. Smooth all my layers out. Clamp this down. So I'll use both of the clamps this time. All right, so now I want to give it a little ratchet because this is going to tighten everything up for me. All right, so that's one of the different things with this frame as a hoop frame versus the Cutie is you do have that ratcheting system so you can get it nice and tight and flat, all of your layers. And now I'm ready to quilt. The other thing is you do get the bungees, so since mine's a little short, I would add my bungees to both sides. I do still need to think about my quilt zone area, just like I would do if I was using the Cutie, but you know, much ready to go. Now, the great thing about this frame, and I'm gonna unhook this so that oh, I did forget to show you one thing, and the whole reason why we are using leaders. See this little thing here? This can actually go into these if you put them on right. And that is what's going to hold your excess roll of fabric out of your way as you build that. So that's a nice little feature as well. So sorry, forgot to show you that. Okay, now that I've shown you that, there's another way that you can use this frame. We sell different leaders. The leaders that come with this one are for the hoop frame. But you can buy the leaders that are for the 3-rail frame, which we're going to show you in a little bit how to load. And you can add the strip of Velcro right to your machine here and use it very similarly to the Evolution Elite frame. So if you do buy those, it comes with Velcro, and instead of using this one, you can actually add the Velcro to your bar here. This is what I did. I just put it in the groove so that it's not in the way when I'm using the clamps, and I make sure it's just kind of ratcheted down when it is, when I am using it more like the hoop frame. Another way that you can do that is you can take your leader or the edge of your quilt sandwich here and you can tape it on. I just didn't like having to take the tape on and off and on and off, which is why I decided to go the Velcro way. I've gotten kind of spoiled, but this works as well too. The type of tape that I used was electrical tape, and that's because it's a little stretchy. It sticks well, but it unsticks and it does not leave a residue on the material. So you would just kind of line up your quilt sandwich, if this wasn't on here, and you tape it directly to your frame. And once you've done that, as long as your quilt sandwich is 4 feet or less, you can use the ratcheting bar just like you would with the Elite frame. So that's 2 ways to load your frame depending on the size of your quilt when you have the Evolution one.
So now that our machine is clean and ready to go, we are going to start by loading the backing onto our frame. So what you're going to do is you'll take your backing and you want to find your center. I have marked the center on all of our leader cloths just to make everyone's life easier. So that's something you should always take the time to do, is mark the center on your rails and on your leader cloths. But we're gonna start by pinning our backing on. And the easiest way that I've found to do this is to pinch your pieces together. So just make sure your center lines line up, and you're just gonna pinch those two together and pin. And we'll go one direction and then we'll go the other. And this just makes it so much smoother as you go. So now you're just gonna roll your backing up a little bit until just make sure everything is straight. Pull your edges. And make sure your machine is ratcheted, because that's an important part there. Pull that. Okay, so now we're gonna pin the other end of the backing, and just make sure you have your center. Again, fold it in half, and then voila, there's your center. And you want your backing attached to this top rail. So what we're gonna do now is roll it back up on this bar. So we'll loosen our top bar, and we will roll our backing onto this bar here. And it's kind of noisy, but it's kind of fun. It's a good workout. All right. So we're gonna lock that down. So now for this step, you can do one of two things. You can put your batting on and then put your top on and clamp it down and do what's called floating. But today, I'm gonna talk about my favorite way, and we're gonna talk about attaching your top fabric and using all of the rails that we have. So we'll put the batting on, and just make sure you've got the right side down. You want the fluffy side down. Okay. So the manual will tell you to pin all the way across, but our machine has a lovely feature called basting. So we are just going to use a base stitch and go all the way across. Now we're going to put our quilt top on. You can stitch all the way across, or you can pin. And because this one is going to not be on this backing permanently, I'm just going to pin this one across. So what you're going to do is just roll it up, and it'll stick to your batting. Make sure that your backing fabric is loose here. Our top is here, and we are going to again pinch and pin. So we'll find our center the same way we did before. We'll grab our pins one more time, and again we have our center line marked. as we come to the end of our pinning here, we'll just tug that, make sure everything is tight, and then we're just gonna roll this back. So we'll need to ratchet these two and unlock the top. And as you go, just make sure your edges are good, nice and straight. And the nice part is your batting will pull as you do. So it's very nice to have that batting in between your two bars. Oh, poo. And now you're ready to quilt. Now that we've shown you how to load each of our frames, it's important to know when to upgrade. If you have the cutie frame, it might be time to upgrade to the hoop frame.
I love my Evolution hoop frame. I started with the cutie and I moved to the Evolution hoop frame because the footprint on it is not as large as some of the other ones, but I still have the ability to quilt any size sandwich. Because it is a hoop frame, but it also has the rolling bar. And what's fun about that is if I have a smaller project where, you know, it's about 4 feet or less, I can do some of the same things that you do with the larger frames. So it's been kind of a nice upgrade for me.
Awesome. As well as upgrading to the Evolution Elite frame, it is great to have that rolling frame. You don't have to worry about pre-preparing your quilt sandwich as much. As long as you have your pieces, you're ready to go and you can quilt and have all of the space you need.
We sure hope you've enjoyed our summer series. With fall just around the corner, quilting season is nearly upon us. So now we're ready to rock and roll or hoop to start getting our quilting done. Our first regular segment for fall, we will talk about how to make a cover for your little rebel.